right, guys, today we are going to talk about dividing whole numbers. This should be a review, but just to go over it, don't forget, if I get to going too fast, you can stop and pause or rewind. Make sure you're following along and you're writing these notes down as well to help you out. So we are going to use a strategy called DMSB. This stands for Does McDonald's sell burgers? And some of you might have heard of other things that it stands for, but that's what we're going to use. Does McDonald's sell burgers? And this just helps us remember the order of dividing. So the D stands for divide. The M stands for multiply. The S stands for subtract. And the B stands for bring down. So that's just to help us remember the order of dividing. And before we actually get started, we are also going to remember that the first number, so if I look at this problem, the first number goes inside the division house. So when it's written like this across, the first number goes inside. So let's go to our first problem, and it is 486 divided by 6. So again, the first number went inside. Before I start dividing, there's two things that I want us to get used to doing. First, every number inside the division house needs a space above it. So my 4 needs a space. My 8 needs a space. My 6 needs a space. So if there's 3 numbers inside, there should be 3 spaces. And the next thing I want us to do is go ahead and put a decimal, because that will help us later on. This is a whole number, a whole 486. Think of it like $486. Where would your decimal go? At the back. And you can go ahead and bring it up into your answer. So I just want us to get used to doing those two things. Every number needs a space, and at the end of a whole number, we put a decimal. So now we can actually go ahead and divide. So first step is divide. What times 6 can get me 4? Nothing. It's going to be too big, so it's 0. So I always start with that first number. Now I look at 48. What times 6 can give me 48? I know that's 8. So that's my dividing. My next step is to multiply. Now I take 8 times 6, and if you want to put a multiplication sign there, you can. 8 times 6 is 48. My next step is to subtract. So 48 minus 48 is 0. And my next step is to bring down 6. After I bring down, I go back to the top. So divide. How many times does 6 go into 6? Or what times 6 gives me 6? That's 1. 6 times 1 gives me 6. Multiply. 1 times 6 is 6. My next step is subtract. 6 minus 6 is 0. And then finally bring down. There's nothing else to bring down there. So my answer is 81. And at this point, there's no other numbers behind the decimal, so we don't have to worry about it. Our answer is just 81. All right, let's look at our next example. We have 250 divided by 5. The first number goes inside. So 250 divided by 5. I'm not ready to divide yet because each number needs spaces. So if I have 3 numbers inside, how many spaces would I have? 3. And then I have to add that decimal at the back. All right, now I am ready to divide. 5 goes into 2 how many times? What times 5 gives me 2 or close to 2 as possible? Nothing. So I put a 0. Now I look at the 25. What times 5 gives me 25? That's 5. My next step is to multiply. So I do 5 times 5 is 25. Next step is to subtract. 25 minus 25 is 0. So I have a 0, but I still need to bring down because I still have a space here. Every space has to have a number in it. So I need to bring down my 0. And I have another 0. I can still divide. What times 5 gives me 0? 0. Now I multiply. 0 times 5 is 0. Subtract. And there's nothing to bring down, so my answer is just 50. All right, let's look at example number 3. Which number is going to go inside my house this time? The first one, which is 309, and then the 3 stays outside. I'm going to have 3 spaces, so 1 above the 3, 1 above the 0, 1 above the 9. Add my decimals. Now I'm ready to divide. 3 goes into 3 one time. My next step is to multiply. 1 times 3 is 3. Subtract. 0. Bring down. I bring down one number at a time. Some people like to try and bring down both because it's a 0, but that's okay. We're going to work with the 0. You only bring down one at a time. What times 3 gives me 0? 0. So now I do multiply next. 0 times 3 is 0. Subtract. 0 minus 0 is 0. Then I bring down again. So all of that was to get us that 0 right there in the middle. So follow your steps. Even if you get confused, follow your steps and you won't go wrong. So now I just brought down, so I'm back up at the top divide. How many times does 3 go into 9? 3. Multiply. 3 times 3 is 9. Subtract. 0. Nothing else to bring down. My answer is 103. All right, last problem. So, which number goes inside? The 448. And then the 14 goes in front. So if you noticed, we have a 2-digit number out here. That's fine. We're going to set it up like normal. I need 3 spaces above my numbers and a decimal place. All right, and let's get started. I need to divide. How many times does 14 go into 4? I know if I do 14 times 1, that's already going to be too big. So I'm going to do 0. Now, how many times does 14 go into 44? And I don't know about you, but I don't know my 14 times table. So I'm just going to guess something. So let's do 14 times 3. So let's try 14 times 3 and work it out over here. So that would be 12, and 3 would be 4. So 42. If I multiplied that again, 14 times 4, it's going to be 16. That's too big. So I want to try and get as close to 44 as I can, but I can't go over. And the number that does that for me right there is a 3. So I need to put a 3 here. Our next step is to multiply. 14 times 3 was 42. Then I subtract. That would be 2. After subtract, I bring down that 8. Okay, so now I need to go back over again and start dividing. So how many times does 14 go into 28? 3 was too big, so I can't use 3 again. Let's do 14 times 2. So that would be 8 and 2. Oh, that one works perfect. So the number I need is 2. My next step is to multiply. So 2 times 14 is 28. We just did that. Next step is subtract. 0. There's nothing to bring down. So my answer on this problem is 32.